Flashpoint, Ukraine. A dramatic attack on a key resupply line ratchets a Russian response as the Kremlin rains down fire on Ukraine. Where is this war heading? And how will Ukraine rebuild from the ashes of cities once under Russian occupation? Now, on the Inside Story, Flashpoint, Ukraine.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lee, VOA correspondent. A stealth attack on a bridge connecting Russia to Crimea has been met with a barrage of Russian missile attacks, striking targets in Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities. How the October 8th pre-dawn explosion happened and who carried it out remains a mystery. Russia says a Ukrainian truck bomb caused the damage in what President Vladimir Putin called an act of terrorism. Ukraine has not publicly acknowledged carrying out the attack. Completed in 2018, the 12-mile-long Kerch Strait Bridge was a pet project of Putin's. It connects Russia's Taman Peninsula with Crimea, which Russia illegally annexed from Ukraine in 2014. With a chunk of the bridge now in the sea below, a key supply route for Russia to transport equipment and troops has been disrupted. Russia's response began Monday morning, firing dozens of cruise missiles, hitting infrastructure targets as well as city streets, parks, and tourist sites. U.S. President Joe Biden condemned Russia's missile attacks, saying the attacks killed and injured civilians and destroyed targets with no military purpose. Biden's statement said the attacks reinforced the U.S. commitment to Ukraine. An emergency meeting of the Group of Seven Nations resulted in a reaffirmation of support to Ukraine for as long as it takes, according to a joint statement by the G7 nations. VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakutsura gets us started.
Russia's airstrikes on Ukraine Monday have killed at least 19 people, prompting an emergency virtual meeting between the leaders of the world's wealthiest nations, the G7, on Tuesday, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
We also have a detailed statement from the Group of Seven, in particular, that all those responsible for terror against Ukraine will be brought to justice, starting with the current political leadership of Russia and ending with everyone who serves these terrorist interests.
G7 leaders coordinated efforts to provide Ukraine with economic security and humanitarian assistance, said White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
President Biden has also discussed with G7 partners what more we can do together to prioritize air defense capabilities for Ukraine, which has been and will continue to be a U.S. priority.
Moscow, which has been partially mobilizing its population, said that more Western military aid for Ukraine means further escalation and a possible clash between Russia and NATO. But observers say air defense systems are necessary not only to protect civilians, but to create a sense of normalcy in Ukraine.
To eventually try and get some of the Ukrainians who have fled since Russia's invasion to return. And the aim here for President Zelensky is to restart Ukraine's economy, which has taken a massive blow since Russia's invasion.
The U.S. has committed more than $16 billion in security assistance for Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February.
So the U.S. and our partners have given Ukraine some air defense systems, but nothing on a big strategic level like the Patriot missile defense system, for example.
The White House would not confirm whether it's considering providing the Patriot missile defense system, which can counter tactical ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and advanced aircraft.
We plan to continue to provide air defense systems to Ukraine, and when there's something to announce in that regard, we'll do that, as we have for the last 8 months.
Weapons and other security aid will be discussed at the Ukraine Security Consultative Group meeting in Brussels on Wednesday. Patsy Widakutsura, VOA News, Washington.
NATO defense ministers got together this week in Brussels, while their U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff also met with the 50-nation Ukraine Defense Contact Group to coordinate next steps. Details from VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb.
With Ukrainians still reeling from the onslaught of indiscriminate Russian missiles this week, the top U.S. general blasted the missile attacks as a war crime.
Russia has deliberately struck civilian infrastructure with the purpose of harming civilians. They have targeted the elderly, the women, and the children of Ukraine. Indiscriminate and deliberate attacks on civilian targets is a war crime.
The European Union also accused Russia of committing war crimes this week, with dozens of Russian missiles killing at least 26 people. Russia launched the missiles during rush hour Monday, targeting civilian infrastructure, parks, busy intersections, and power plants, not military facilities.
Brutal, it's beyond the pale.
These are the latest in a really, really long list of war crimes that Russia has committed in Ukraine. Going back to Bucha, right, in the suburb of Kyiv, which when the Russians withdrew, the mass graves that have been found in eastern Ukraine.
Ukraine's urgent weapons wish list for NATO leaders includes more howitzers to provide artillery fire and more air defense weapons to shoot down incoming missiles. Germany has delivered the first of its air defense systems to Ukraine, and a senior U.S. defense official told VOA that the U.S. will deliver 2 NASAMS, National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, to Ukraine within the next month. This is the same type of system used to protect the skies of the U.S. Capitol. At the top of Ukraine's wish list to NATO, according to officials, are multiple launch rocket systems, tracked vehicles capable of launching 12 rockets at Russian targets before reloading, weapons considered crucial in Ukraine's counteroffensive.
We're going to do everything we can to make sure that they have what's required to be effective. And most recently, we've seen them be very effective, both in the east and down in the south, as they've taken back quite a bit of territory from the Russians.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg called Russia's actions in recent weeks the most serious escalation of the war since the invasion in February. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow's latest missile attacks came in direct response to a truck bombing Saturday that damaged a strategic bridge linking mainland Russia with the Crimean Peninsula. The Russian military has been using the bridge to resupply its forces in Ukraine's south. Carla Babb, VOA News, the Pentagon.
Before the bridge attack and Russian missile response, the ground war appeared to be moving into a critical new phase as Ukrainian forces regained territory that Russian troops had occupied since the February invasion. Details from our Henry Ridgewell in London.
Ukrainian troops have broken through Russian lines in the southern region of Kherson, liberating several villages. Kyiv's forces now control settlements some 30 kilometers behind previous front lines.
The mood of the boys, everything has changed compared to what it was before. It has become much better. There is some light at the end of the tunnel, inspired by victories.
Ukrainian forces are also consolidating territorial gains in the east. The city of Liman is in ruins, its streets littered with burned-out Russian tanks and dead soldiers. Ukrainian generals say they have advanced 55 kilometers over the past 2 weeks close to Kharkiv. Russian forces are struggling to hold their line.
We've had reports that the units in northern Kherson Oblast are completely understrength, understaffed, and stretched along a very, very long front line that the Russian troops just do not have the men to fill.
The United States announced an additional $625 million worth of new security assistance for Kyiv this week. Russian President Vladimir Putin last week announced the annexation of 4 areas of Ukraine, a move rejected by most of the international community. Analysts say the war is entering a critical moment.
It's becoming, in some ways, make or break for Putin. His abilities to survive depends on some level by saying, I've succeeded in defending the Russian homeland and expanding it. Where this goes, nobody knows. but it's safe to say that this probably is the most perilous moment for Mr. Putin since he took power about 20 years ago.
Putin has said he will use any means necessary to defend Russia, raising fears he could use so-called tactical nuclear weapons.
Stuff is trending very badly for Russia. Now, I don't know how bad it has to be before Russia would consider using nuclear weapons in a very serious way. I'm not even sure Putin knows in his own mind how bad this would have to be for him to use nuclear weapons.
For now, Russia is trying to turn the tide with conventional forces. The Defense Ministry said this week over 200,000 men have already been drafted into the armed forces since a partial mobilization was announced 2 weeks ago.
These forces are unlikely to provide any sort of additional defensive capabilities or offensive capabilities in the short run. And in the long run, these troops are unlikely to be well trained or necessarily highly motivated.
Russian forces continue to launch shells and missiles into Ukrainian-held territory, often into civilian areas. This convoy of evacuees fleeing the city of Zaporizhia was hit September 30th. Dozens were killed, including many women and children. Moscow did not comment on the attack. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Through the echoes of air raid sirens, millions of school children are returning to classrooms in Ukraine. More than 2,000 schools are reportedly damaged or destroyed by Russia's war. 115 kilometers east of Kyiv is a small village where Russian troops occupied it and burned much of it to the ground before Ukrainian forces reclaimed it. VOA Eastern Europe Chief Miroslava Gongatsa was there to show us how they're rebuilding.
Bogdanivka was under Russian occupation for 20 days. Russian forces turned the local school and kindergarten into a base and a hospital. When the Ukrainian army came to liberate the village, the Russians set fire to school facilities, reducing them to ashes. Walking amid the ruins of her life's work, the school director recalls how she ran with her teenage daughter at night across a field and a forest for safety, and how devastated she was when, on her return, she saw what happened to her school.
School and kindergarten in a village, it's the heart of everything. So this was the most painful thing that happened in our village. When we learned that the school was on fire, we hoped it could survive. But soon we learned that there was nothing left of the school.
Standing in the place that was her office, she speaks of how technologically advanced her school was and how she dreams of bringing her student back here. She's pushing to rebuild the school as soon as possible. More than 300 school children in this village did return to the new school year, and local authorities are trying to accommodate the families and bring normality to the children's life. Alexander Kutsenko, who oversees the local government education system, says that all the children in this village have resumed their education in nearby facilities.
At this time, we are working on rebuilding the education facility. We understand that the country is at war and there is not enough money, so we are hoping for help from investors in terms of rebuilding.
For now, as a temporary solution, this local cultural club is reorganizing to host the school. The civil society initiative Safe Ed Foundation, led by former Minister of Education Hanna Novosad, is helping with this project and others around the country.
Russia is not only having the war against Ukrainian people, it is also having the war against our education system. So if you look at the scale of destruction, it is just enormous. So it is very hard not to notice that they are very deliberately destroying our schools. So more than 2,000 schools around the country are damaged. There are hundreds and hundreds of settlements and cities, villages like this village of Bogdanivka, where there are no school, no kindergartens, no access to education whatsoever. And they do it very explicitly from ideological reasons as well.
Despite the devastation, learning facilities for children are coming back to life.
We are arranging here a so-called digital learning space. So this will be a space for kids who live in this village, where they will have access to devices that are coming within the next week, where they will have access to internet and will be able to either work alone or do their online lessons.
Children and teachers are eager to participate and learn. Even on Sunday, Children returned to their damaged school and joined the effort to bring their community back to life. Мирослава Гонгадзе, VOA News, Богданівка, Ukraine.
Among those sharing the 2022 Nobel Peace Prize is the Center for Civil Liberties, the Ukrainian human rights organization. Its leader, Alexandra Matvichuk, told VOA's Miroslava Gongadze that what Ukraine needs most is weapons.
Ukraine needs weapons, an efficient amount, because Russian people will tolerate war criminals, but they will not tolerate losing war criminals. And this military defeat in Ukraine provides the first sign of bankruptcy of Putin ratings in Russia.
It's been a busy couple of weeks for our Eastern European Bureau Chief Miroslava Gongadze. She spent some time in her native Ukraine reporting on the situation there. Then she reported from the Warsaw Security Forum and then came to the United States for a few days. I caught up with her while she was in Boston to get a debrief on what she's seen and heard. Can you share with us what was happening in Ukraine as far as what people are feeling and experiencing before the attack on the bridge? What was the mood like? And then what's the situation now as far as you understand?
You know, Elizabeth, during the time that when I was in Kyiv, it was just before this latest attack. The mood in Kyiv was pretty calm, and people were happy that Ukraine is making advances. The Ukrainian military forces are making advances on the east and south. So everybody were upbeat about the situation. There was a lot of worries as well about possibility of using nuclear weapons, and there was a lot of discussions about that. However, people were happy, and in Kyiv it was pretty calm. However, after the last attack, the mood changed a lot because people had to sit in the shelters for 5 hours. They did not know what was happening, and it was pretty big shock for a whole population of Ukraine because attack happened all over Ukraine, in almost every important city, and every important facilities were bombed by Russian forces.
So at the Warsaw Security Forum, what are officials from the US and Europe saying about this potential nuclear option?
General Petraeus said that there are other options that Putin actually have before using nuclear. He said before using nuclear, Putin would try to basically make Ukrainian state dysfunctional, try to make life in Ukraine unlivable right now. General Hodges said that the best effect nuclear has when the strongest nuclear has when it's not used, and that's what he was trying to tell President Putin. And he said that the United States and the Western community have to send a very, very clear, strong message to Putin and to his circle that this would not be tolerated at all, and the response from the West and the response from US would be very strong.
What are the Ukrainian officials telling you there at the forum?
They say that they would fight. There's no way Ukraine would go for any peace talks right now or peace negotiation, because the peace is not possible at this moment in this stage of war. The peace only possible when Russian forces would be out of Ukraine, and then only then the negotiation is possible. And Ukrainians are resolute in their determination, pushing Russian forces out of Ukraine. And we saw that on the battlefield, Ukraine is winning, and this is clear for foreign and NATO generals and for officials. So that's why basically Putin is waving this nuclear flag, because that's his only option he has at this point.
What was it like for you personally to be there and covering it and with the Ukrainians?
Elizabeth, I spent time in Odessa, in Kharkiv, in Izum. I went to mass graves in Izum right after the liberation of the town, and it's shocking. It's difficult to watch. It's difficult because you obviously see all these tortured bodies, dead bodies, mass of them. There are kids in mass graves. And you cannot forget that image. It's standing in front of your eyes. So it's a difficult for me personally, because obviously I'm Ukrainian and this is my countrymen basically dying and suffering.
It's been 6 months since word started to filter out about a massacre in the town of Bucha. Hundreds of bodies were discovered, including dozens of people killed, execution style, hands tied behind their backs, shot in the head at close range. Despite the trauma, the rebuilding of Bucha is underway. Our Anna Chernikova was there.
Images of the atrocities committed by the Russian army in Bucha at the outskirts of Kyiv shocked the world months ago. The city was devastated, and in mass graves, hundreds of bodies were found. When the city was liberated in April, it was impossible to imagine that life could return to normal here. With classrooms destroyed, a return to school anytime soon was unthinkable. But 6 months later, Bucha's children and those internally displaced from other parts of Ukraine are coming to classrooms that have been quickly rebuilt. This war took away their childhood. Most of them had to evacuate from their home to safer places. Others survived the Russian occupation. Some of their friends didn't. Teachers and parents say they are happy children will return after going through so much.
When I came here after the occupation, when it was liberated, I came to the school to see what was going on. These broken windows, I didn't think we would be able to welcome the children by September 1st. I thought we would just have a remote studies format.
But as the war is ongoing, the risks remain very high.
Indeed, I will be worried, but we've been told that the basement will be equipped with Wi-Fi. We have already packed an emergency bag for the child, just in case. Still, we hope that everything will be fine.
Instructors say their teaching approach will never be the same as it was before Russia's February invasion.
I am no longer the teacher I was before February 24th. What I saw, what I experienced, and what I am witnessing and experiencing now. Of course, it will definitely affect my work, my educational work with children. And the children also saw everything.
This school, like others in Bucha, was renovated with the help of the U.S. Global Empowerment Mission, an international charity. Its founder, Michael Caponi, believes that this is not just an education investment, it is the restart of country's economy on various levels.
All of this is like the ecosystem, like it starts moving in a positive direction again. So that's why I always say there's a multitude of reasons why a minimal investment, $100,000 for a school, imagine what it does, right? It solves so many different things than just the educational problem.
The Russian assault drove out many Bucha residents, but they are coming back. Children are back at their studies, making this step, despite the dangers, a battle won. Anna Chernikova for VOA News, Bucha.
That's all for now. Follow me on Twitter at EliTV1 and follow VOA News on Instagram and Facebook. Online, stay up to date at voanews.com and check out past episodes on our free streaming service, VOA+. Thanks for being with us. See you next week for The Inside Story.